Main goal for today in terms of what I'm hoping to present is to get you exposure to a side passion of mine outside of my main fundamental financial planning business. So I'm a part of an RA, and so a quick introduction on myself. Chase Wigenizer, financial advisor in New York City. I've joined Magnus Financial, an independent RA from registered investment advisory firm in New York City about several years ago as their first and still only ever associate financial advisor. Collectively, we're managing roughly around 2.2 billion. So we're a multi-billion-dollar RIA firm, and we specialize in holistic financial planning, not only investments, but estate planning, tax mitigation, insurance planning, retirement planning. And so when I was up and coming, learning and getting exposed to a lot of information, I was shocked that over high school, an Ivy League education, my first job out of private equity, no one really taught me these core fundamental values or principles for personal financial planning. And so that was something that I've been wanting to correct and have been doing so now for the past several years. And so not only am I wanting to get you exposed to a version of these presentations, because I've now done probably over 100 of them, and each group is customized and personalized. So I'm going to give a general overview of quote unquote financial planning, but I also want to give you a sense of what I'm doing and hoping to do not only now, but in the future. So I'll share my screen. We'll go through the education, and I also really want this to be collaborative. I know everyone here is really sophisticated, but financial literacy is intimidating as all heck and can sometimes be dry. So the more conversational and relaxed I can make the conversation, the better. So please interject, type in the chat, whatever is easy. Okay. Can I get some thumbs up? Is the screen coming through? Perfect. Okay. So we'll dive into it. Yeah, there it is. Perfect. Again, information, all the slides and material that I cover, I'll send out to all the participants as well. So you have that resource. We can attach it on the website as well. But all this information will be accessible. So again, fundamentals of financial planning. Got the WIC logo in the background as well. First, and starting off, I said how I've now done about over 100 presentations for the past several years. Some of the core groups that we presented to listed here, just some of the logos. We've presented to universities such as Cornell University. I've presented to charitable groups such as the Harris Home for Children, the Grooming Alchemist. I've presented to medical residency groups such as Geisinger. Presented to numerous companies, ones of being Verkada, Asphalt Green, Better Health, and then also state organizations like, for instance, the Texas Young Lawyers Association, which is the bar association for the state of Texas, and helps with the continual educational credits for Texas lawyers. And so wanting to get a sense and want to show this because we are now breaching on not only multiple groups, but multiple different types of groups, medical residents, lawyers, students, children, whatever it is. And so these financial literacy presentations aren't one and the same. I really have customized it and made it a custom for the group so that it can be as pertinent, as impactful for who I'm speaking to. And so when it comes to the financial literacy session that I'm doing today, it's going to be a general overview of really the culmination of all the knowledge that I share to these specific groups. So some of it might be pretty elementary, pretty fundamental, but there are hopefully going to be some good tricks on just how to approach budgeting, planning, and everything else like that. So let's dive into it. The main expectation for the session is hopefully walking away with an understanding, in my opinion, on the 4 core fundamental things of financial planning, and specifically targeting this for the people who are really just coming out of college, first just entering into the workforce, right? What do they need to do or at least know of in order to build that strong financial foundation? Obviously, as you get farther through life, children, family planning, estate planning, even entity planning when it comes to starting a business can get pretty complicated. This is the, again, foundation. And so going over budgeting 101, why to invest, how to invest, and then how to protect yourself long-term, which is really when I dive into you're accepting an offer letter and your company's offering you certain company benefits. What does that actually impact? What does that mean to you? Before I get through, one quick disclosure for legality reasons, but it's also important, in my opinion, for people who are, again, entering the force to know. In the financial space, there are 2 main types of parties. There's the broker side and there's the independent advisor side. Has anyone ever seen the movie Wolf of Wall Street? Right? Aerotime technology, huge upside potential. That guy, the guy who's telling the story, that's the broker model. Right now, obviously, it's a little bit of an hyperbole, but the idea behind the broker is when it comes down to it, they're under no legal obligation to act in your best interest. Meaning when they give you advice, mean, they have to be competitive. They want to retain your business, so they're going to give you good advice. But if they trade your account 10 times versus 5 times, that can lead to higher compensation. If they suggest this fund over this fund, it could lead to higher compensation. There's just natural bias that's created because of this model. On the right-hand side is the fiduciary standard, and it's that third word on the first line, fiduciary. Whoever holds the title of fiduciary legally has to act in the best interest of their clients at all time. And so there's a lot of laws and regulations underneath there, but when it comes down to it, whoever holds that title can have no bias in any of their recommendations and any of their planning for their clients. There's also a really big distinction. If you're ever speaking with somebody, make sure to ask, are you a fiduciary only advisor? In the world that we're living in today, people have the ability to take on and off their fiduciary hats, given what type of advice they're actually advising you on. If they're fiduciary only, they're always fiduciary. So it's a good question to basically vet somebody, just because if they do have that title, you can lower down your guards. You know that they're legally bound to give you, in their opinion, the best advice for your personal situation. Any questions off this? Keep going. So first, number one, and this is really the core of it all, right? Because if we can understand our cash flow, we can understand how much income, how much money we're getting, how much money we have to spend, and what that savings ability is. That's really the lifeblood of all this financial planning. And so when it comes to it, I was an athlete in college. The analogy I love to give is if someone came up to me and said, hey, how do I get in shape? How do I, gain muscle? And I just said, work out. They'd be like, oh yeah, great. Like, that's not very helpful. And so the same as when someone says, how do I actually save? How do I invest? And people start saying, we'll start with a budget. It's not helpful. And so I wanted to break down, in my opinion, the best way to follow a budget and actually stick to your goals. And the way I feel it's best to do that is breaking down your overall expenses between fixed and variable. And so real quick, diving into it, the fixed are those amounts that aren't changing on a daily basis, on a monthly basis. The things that you know are going to be the same amount month after month, year after year. Your rents, your student loan payments, your car payments, your Wi-Fi, your Netflix subscription, whatever it is, they're stated fixed amounts. Write all those down, because those are the easy ones you can actually track. Those are the easy baseline of what you know is going to be coming out of your account on a monthly basis. Track those on a sheet. This is actually a screenshot of a tool that I'll provide to everyone afterwards. So just wanted to give this for reference. We'll cover it at the end. But those are the variables that you should actually be tracking, because they're actually recordable. When it comes to the variable expenses, I've seen people lose their mind trying to keep themselves to $200 a month on groceries, $500 a month on entertainment and bars and food, $300 on gas. You will lose your mind. And so in my opinion, the more efficient way to actually stick to a budget, write down the fixed, know exactly what's coming out. And then when it comes to the variable, create a general pool goal, right? Instead of keeping yourself to every line item, say, okay, with everything else, if I make $10,000 a month, and I know I spend $5,000 on fixed, your total wiggle room is 5,000. 5, 10, 5,000 is remaining. If your goal is to save $2,000, your variable pool goal is 3,000. And the best way to track that is on a credit card, right? The idea about don't bog down. And I was making the joke earlier as well. We have our credit expert on the line as well, Renee. And so he gave a fantastic presentation. I'll call him out if you're interested to really dive deep into credit optimization. Check out his video. It's A+. But in terms of keeping to a budget, if your goal is to spend only 3,000 on your variable pool, if on day 25 of the month you check your credit balance and it reads 2,500, you subconsciously know the last 5 days of that month you have $500 to spend on whatever, and it doesn't matter what you spend it on. But it's a much more efficient way to actually keep yourself to a budget and achieve your savings goals. Any questions on that? I forgot I put in that animation. That was pretty fun. Quick overview, and again, highlighting Renee's video because it goes way more in depth. But the things that actually affect and build your credit, quick overview here on the 5 major points, right? Payment history, don't be late, be consistent with your payments, 35%. Amount owed, don't let it build. Learn this from Renee. The A+ range is if you can keep it below 10% of your credit limit. So the C to A is 30% to 10%, meaning if your credit limit is $10,000, the Top tier rating would be keeping your balance below $1,000 on a monthly basis. Keeping it above zero, because you never want your account to sit idle and be an anchor on your balance sheet, but you want it within that range to most optimally build your credit score. Length of history, nothing really to do there besides being consistent. If you can avoid canceling credit cards and losing that history, do so. Short-term debt, what kinds of debt, all those different things will pile up as you progress through life. But I just want to provide that overview so people have a place to reference. And then the last one as well was running a credit bureau. The last thing is just teaching people that when it comes to it, each one of these bureaus gives you one free credit look a year. Do it. It's like spring cleaning. Check not only for yourself what's affecting my credit, but these are also government organizations. They're very slow. We literally checked on one of my clients last year. They had a car that they had paid off, and it was showing that they hadn't made a payment for about 2 years, and it lowered their score by like 40 points, 50 points. We called the bureau, got it corrected, and their score was drastically increased before we applied for his new home. Check not only for yourself, but to also keep them in line as well. Renee, did I miss anything major or important?
No, that was good stuff. The one website I would give is annualcreditreport.com. I'll put it in the chat just so people have the direct link. And now because of COVID, there's actually a law that's giving people one free credit report each per week until they lift that. So that's great to keep up to date. And that's the direct source, so good stuff.
I love it. Thank you. Again, that's Wick right there. Appreciate you just jumping in. That's fantastic. All right. That's the fundamental of it all, right? If we can understand the overall cash flow and our lifeblood source, right, that savings ability, we can really do some damage and start building things for the long term. So now we're going to start, before we actually dive into what the person right out of college, what should be building to build that foundation, just even emphasizing why it's important in general. And this is really impactful for when I'm speaking to the charitable groups and the children, kind of teaching them really that importance and why they should be learning this, especially people out of college as well. So when I stress this, it's really the difference between money sitting versus money working, or AKA inflation versus compounding. Now, I know we have a semi-smallest group here, but I'm going to ask you guys to participate just to kind of keep it engaged. Money sitting, so inflation. How much, just rough guesses from everyone in the group, how much do you think a carton of milk cost back in 1916? So a carton of milk, this big. Just random guesses. Unmute yourself, just start shouting out answers.
75 cents.
75 cents. Max,
$1.
$1.
I said 30 cents.
30 cents. $1, 35 cents, 75 cents.
10 cents.
10 cents. 10 cents was definitely the closest. I've never had anyone guess it correctly.
Whoa.
Back in 1916, a carton of milk cost 9 cents. And this is a physical representation of actually the power of inflation and how it affects the value of our money, right? The impact and the buying power of our money. Back in 1916, a quart of milk cost 9 cents. 9 cents then in 1966 bought you a glass. 2017, it bought you 7 tablespoons. Nowadays, it probably buys you like the fragrance of milk. You just lean over a couple glasses, that kind of thing. The idea that your money buys less and less, and it's this negative impact, this negative force that people always forget about. I have so many clients who are potentially coming in, they're sitting on $100,000 of cash, sometimes extremists as $500,000 of cash. And what they're not realizing, they think it's safe, it's just sitting in the bank. There's actually this negative force that's constantly dragging down the value of that money, especially given last year, if anyone's remembering the headlines, inflation hit a high of 9%, which is one of the highest it's been in basically over the past 50 years. And it's still sitting decently high compared to the average years at around 4% now. It's something to be conscious of, and one of the main reasons why we want to capture the power of compounding or investing, which we'll actually talk about now. So again, one more participation from the group. If I gave everyone in this room a penny, and I said every day, that penny, whatever penny you have, will double. So 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, so on and so on. How much money would you have after a month? And I've had a lot of really smart people, so I see people start doing exponentials and start get gut reaction. How much money, not pennies, but just money, will you have after 1 month of pennies doubling? Any guesses? And random guesses, shoot them out.
Around $50.
50 bucks.
$5,000.
$5,000.
5 million. 5
$5
million.
million bucks. I love it. Max. You're not getting
I
that
don't
as
want to
up.
embarrass myself. Go 10,000.
I said
10,000.
50, so you're good.
I'm not gonna lie, Artie, you've been killing it with all the guesses. The answer is 5.4 million.
What?
I was close.
You were definitely close. So obviously, again, a little bit of an exaggeration, right? If anyone ever comes up to you and says, hey, I can double your money for 30 days straight, run the opposite way. They're going to the ponies, they're gonna go to the casino. That's not real, right? But the idea and the reason I put this in here is to show the impact of how over time money doubling can really, really have a positive effect. Later in life, when we have this accumulation of funds and you have $1 million, right? 1 million going to 2 million is just as easy to accomplish as 100 going to 200. Scale and size really can make a difference. And it's starting now versus later that makes a big impact. And that's the last thing I emphasize on this sheet as well, especially when I'm in college or people who are just in the young 20s. A lot of them think, oh, you know, I can play catch up later in life. When I'm earning more, that's when I can really start to save. In my opinion, majority of people, unless someone's sitting on a multi-million-dollar business idea or anything else, otherwise then talk to me after the session, we'll talk about tax mitigation. But unless you're sitting on that, most people have to do the nitty-gritty, hard grinding savings. And that saving 1 penny and that growing to 2 doesn't feel as good as going from 1.3 to 2.6. But everyone has to start at day one eventually. And I always stress, especially to young people, I'd rather see them start day one in their 20s versus in their 30s or 40s. Because there's so many people that lose that amount of time and lose that power of compounding. The last stress that I like to have when it comes to, again, stressing the importance of investing, is putting literally those 2 points side by side. The top is a dollar invested. Back in 1974, you put $1 in the S&P 500, which is, if you're ever looking at the market and they're talking about the market and the market's doing this, they're generally referring to the S&P 500. It's the top 500 largest companies in the world. And so if you have that dollar invested, and this dollar rolled through all the ups and downs, the dot-com boom, the 2008 crash, all the major scary events, that dollar invested is now still worth $154 today versus the dollar that was just sitting in your mattress in a jar, whatever it is, has a real value of 16 cents. That difference is the importance of investing. That's what you're fighting on a constant basis. Any questions here? All right, so we talked about 1, budgeting. If you can lock that down, have an understanding of your savings, you can actually start to accomplish your goals and build for the long term. Why to invest? We talked about what's the actual importance. Why do we actually need to start doing this, and not starting later in life, but starting now. Now we'll start to talk about how to invest. And again, quick reiteration, this is in the perspective of someone just entering the workforce, right? Who is just really starting to earn their income, starting to pay off student loans, get their first apartment, all those different things. What do they need to do to build that foundation? And so the 3 major areas I like to see people who are in that space start to build are 3 things. 1, your liquid, your short-term strategies. This is your savings account. Right now, given the current market we're living in, a high yield savings account. This is your first line of defense, and teaching people that even though we just talked about cash on hand is the only place that inflation can hurt you, it's still important to have cash on hand because we need something to fall back on in those moments we can't anticipate. In my recommendation, I always suggest around 4 to 6 months of your monthly expense. So again, going back to the importance of building a budget, whatever you spend on a monthly basis, have saving in cash 4 to 6 months of that amount. So if you spend 3,000, you're looking at 12 to 18 is your range, and choose wherever it is comfortability within there. The main example I like to give is COVID. I was about 2 years out of college at that time, and I had a lot of friends who were in nice, high-paying investment banking jobs, right? And when it comes to COVID, no one anticipated it, right? It was this anomaly event that no one saw coming. And these friends of mine who were going out to New York City, enjoying the clubs and doing everything else, didn't prioritize saving because they thought, I'm making $150,000, $200,000 a year, I'm fine. And all of a sudden, when COVID happened, companies started to make cuts, and the first place that they made cuts was the new blood. And if they didn't have those 4 to 6 months built up in savings, they couldn't figure it out when the whole world was frozen, no one was hiring, and they had to go back home. That's one of the first line of defenses that we need to start building and prioritizing. Middle bucket, and it's incredible how many conversations I have with people who don't have this middle bucket built out. it's your taxable investment account, right? First one's just cash. Second one is your general investment account. Any brokerage account, individual, taxable, these are all the same name for the same account. But the idea is it allows us to put money to work in the market and have no penalty to actually pull it out, right? The only thing that we have to do in order to actually get access to that money is to spend, or rather pay the capital gains tax that we have. It's that growth money where that top one, the liquid, the emergency fund, any money that we need within the year's time comes from there. Our long-term savings are 2 to 10 years, buying a home, buying a car, investing in your first business, whatever it is, comes from this middle area. And then we can even talk about some further strategies with, like, for instance, there's tax mitigation that could be coming from this account. If anyone hasn't heard of tax harvesting, I don't want to get down a rabbit hole, but that's a really exciting concept that's accomplished through this account. If no one's ever heard of non-purpose portfolio loans, which is where you can actually leverage accounts like this and borrow against them, have your money working for you in 2 separate areas. Both of those benefits are accomplished through this midterm taxable investment account. And then the last area that I want to see people who are, again, just coming into the workforce, just starting to focus on building that foundation, some form of retirement account. And so this is the time that I really break down for people the difference between pre-tax and Roth. So one quick show of hands, I'm going to explain it, but also just curious in the group right now, how many people are confident with Roth versus traditional, or Roth versus pre-tax? Yeah, semi. First, I'll start off with a goofy analogy because, again, I think everyone's gotten a sense of that. That's kind of the way I roll, right? Make us laugh, and then we'll dive into the specifics. So again, I was an athlete, and the best way I could create an analogy to show the impact of Roth and how creating tax-free money can really be a benefit to you was through this guy. If anyone's ever an athlete or played sports or anything else like that, injuries are something that everyone battled. Personally, I dislocated my shoulder. Both my MCLs are gone. I'm a mess from football. Wouldn't have traded it for anything. Loved it. But if someone came to me when I was age 10, when I first started playing football, and said, hey, we're going to give you one injury now. Nothing major. You'll recover. But then once you recover, you'll have the 100% confidence that throughout the rest of your athletic career, you will never be injured again. I'm talking not a broken nail, not a twisted ankle, not anything. I'm completely impervious. How many athletes would take that deal? I would sign on the dotted line right away. That's the power of Roth. That idea that we get rid of the burden at the beginning, and then once we do so, as long as it's in the account, it grows completely without that burden. So let's actually talk about that. I'll take him off the screen because a lot to look at, right? First, breaking down pre-tax. Most people think about this through 401ks and Roth. So real quick, 401ks is if you're ever part of a group or a company, right? If you're a part of a company, you most likely have access to a 401k. An IRA is the same type of account. 401k, you're with a group. IRA stands for individual retirement account. The same type of account, if you ever actually leave a group, this is transferred and converted into an IRA. Same type of account. Each one comes with different contribution and investment restrictions, but each come with the pre-tax and Roth options. So that is the main component we're going to break down. So I'll refer to 401ks in general. Pre-tax 401k. If you make $100,000, if you put $20,000 into this pre-tax 401k, when it's time to go pay taxes that year, you'll be viewed as an $80,000 income earner. I make 100. I took a $20,000 chunk, I put into the pre-tax account. I'm now viewed as an $80,000 income earner. Why is that beneficial? 2 reasons. 1, we are taxed on brackets, meaning the more you make in America, the higher you're taxed. Imagine if you're just near one of those tax thresholds. If you can strategically invest enough to lower yourself and make you appear as a lower income earner, you can help to lower your taxable income bracket in that given year. That's a major benefit. 2, that 20,000 chunk, we would have had to pay tax on, right? The government probably would have taken $7,000, $6,000 of it. Instead of us giving that to the government, the full $20,000 now goes into that account and starts capturing that compounding interest, starts investing for us, actually going to work for us. It grows over the years as long as it's in the account, never touched by the government. The flip side of the coin is this. In retirement, past the age of 59 and a half specifically, Anything that we pull out, the basis, the growth, everything has to be taxed at income. Flip side of the coin, Roth, money goes in taxed. And as long as it's in the account, it grows tax-free. And the real big kicker, anything we pull out come retirement, age 59 and a half, is completely tax-free as well. Said another way, let's say I gave everyone in here $1 million pre-tax and $1 million Roth in retirement. You're all at 65. If we sold both of them completely outright, the pre-tax 401k, pre-tax IRA, probably give you a check for $640,000. The Roth IRA, you'll be getting a check for $1 million. That's the impact. Said one other way, if I gave everyone in this room $100,000, and on average, let's say you didn't need to touch it for 40 years, that $100,000, again, going back to the power of compounding interest, money doubles every 10 years on average. That 100,000 will have grown to 1.6 at the end of that 40 years. 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 1.6 million. Would you rather pay tax on the $100,000 today or all of the 1.6 that it's grown into? Roth is so impactful because it protects that amount of growth. Now, I stressed about Roth and how impactful it is, especially for people who are directly coming out of college, but there are benefits and pros to both the pre-tax and the Roth. And my job is helping people to balance out what they should be contributing to for each of them. Again, past the threshold of this conversation because I want to be conscious of time, but managing RMDs or required minimum distributions for your pre-tax 401k. Basically, again, that account's never been taxed. The government's going to start forcing you to pull out money at age 72. Some clients have accounts at the range of 5 million, 10 million plus. The required minimum distributions, what the government will force them to pull out, could be as large as $300,000, $500,000 come retirement. My job is to, in this period of time when they're retired, to when that age of forced requirements start happening, I make them live off entirely tax-free money, and we convert portions of that pre-tax. So we lower that required minimum distribution come age 72 when they're forced to start pulling money out. There's a lot of advanced planning. And so I'm giving a general overview, and I'm saying a little bit more detail now, because generally I don't get into this in depth when it's just college students or, charitable groups or even associates at law firms and everything else. But we have a lot of sophisticated people in this group, and I want to at least get them exposure to it. A quick overview, 3 major areas, in my opinion, for a foundation: emergency fund, taxable account, a retirement account. Any questions on those? Guy always gets me. Now we have the different accounts set up. Where do we actually invest them? And quick overview on these. Bonds, individual securities, exchange traded funds, mutual funds, private securities. Right down the line, bonds, think of them as contracts or promises, right? You give the government $800, they promise in a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is, to give you back 1,000, 1,500, 5% return, whatever the stated amount is. Because it's with a high entity like the government or a company, and because it's in the form of this contract or promise, it has higher guarantees. And so because of those guarantees, a little bit higher safety, less return generally. Right now, and this is a little tip just for the given market, treasury bills, which if you go to any econ class are the risk-free asset in the world, are returning 5.15%. They're also tax favored in terms of short-term money needed for a year or less. It's a great alternative than keeping money in the bank right now, especially with all the bank volatility out there. 2, individual securities. If you buy Apple, you actually own Apple. You are an owner of Apple. Now you are this big of owner and you mean nothing in the grand scheme of things, but you own Apple. Because of that, you get the rides, the ups and the downs of the market. You take on the risk with that company. Because of that risk, generally higher chances of return, but also generally higher chances of loss as well. And so that balance is what you have to find, the balance between bonds and securities. But one thing I like to stress, especially for people who are just starting off building that foundation, exchange traded funds, or also known as ETFs, are generally people's best friends. Now, again, I can't make sweeping recommendations because of my fiduciary only status, but for people who are fee conscious and want to be efficient with their costs and also accomplish diversification, which we'll talk about in a second, ETFs are one of the most efficient way to do so. Think of them like this. If you buy an ETF, you are exposed to 50, 100, 500 companies all at once. The idea being, if you buy an ETF, it will be directly invested in 500 companies, and the return of the ETF, the return you get will be the average return of all 500 companies of that. You'll get exposure to all 500. It will be the same type of process of you going in and actually trying to buy each of those 500 by yourself. A lot more efficient to just do it through an ETF. Private securities are your real estate, your actual companies, everything else. Most people aren't exposed to those until later in life. Any questions on that brief overview on the types of investments out there? The last thing in terms of investments is the power of diversification, what we just talked about. I have so many clients who are either just investing in the S&P 500, investing in some singular names, whatever it is. That's not an efficient model to be in. If anyone was keeping track of last year, the S&P 500 went down by 20.5%, NASDAQ went down by 32.5%. Those are reviewed as the general market. You're exposed to 500 companies plus when you are invested in those two different ETFs, those two different exchanges. But in terms of these brackets right here, and if anyone's looking at the sheet, these are columns of the different years in the different market. People in my industry classify stocks across 9 different classes. Each of these colors is a class. The S&P 500, NASDAQ is only this box right here, large cap. Meaning if you're exposed to that, you're exposed to 500 companies, but you're only exposed to one area within the general scheme of the entire investment world. I like to see my clients get exposure to every single one of these boxes: large cap, mid cap, small cap, real estate, international emerging, commodities, fixed income, cash, all the different areas, because no matter what, in a given year, they'll be exposed to one of the highest performing asset classes in that given year. Instead of our balance sheet doing this and making big swings, I'd rather see steady growth in the right direction. The one last thing that I like to touch on when it comes to, again, investing and kind of teaching people of this, 2008, 2009, we'll focus on these 2 years. Everyone kind of knows what happened in 2008, right? The housing crash, everything else. The market went down that year by 38.4% on average. The lowest point was actually 98%. Basically saying, imagine your account. You have $1 million, $2 million in a retirement account. You're about to retire. And all of a sudden, by the end of that year, that account's almost gone down by 50%. That's scary. That's a really, really scary environment to live in. And a lot of people introduce emotion into their investments, and that's when they make a mistake. I've had so many horror stories where people got fearful in these moments, sold a lot of their investments, and what they did not realize was the very next year, the market recovered by 37.2%. If you sold here and missed out on this recovery, it's nearly impossible to come back from that. The idea as well is this swing on average doesn't happen gradually. It's not an accumulation of 60 days, 120 days on steady progression. The market return can be, so in general, the past 20 years, the market has returned roughly around, I think, over 200% in terms of if you've been invested solidly in the market for 20 years. That return can be attributed to 15 days of trading. Everything else levels out, meaning the biggest swings happen on literally day intervals, meaning this 2008, 2009 swing happened on an average of around 10 days out of the 730 days out of the entire year. If you miss one of those days, if you try to day trade, if you try to play the market and time the market and introduce emotion, you will make a financial mistake. And so we like to preach disciplined, long-term investment strategies with a purpose. If it's a year or less, the high yield savings account, everything else, right? If you have a goal from 2 years to 10 years, taxable account. If you're looking towards retirement, your retirement accounts. We base our strategy, we base our risk off the needs of that money. Does that make sense? Any questions on this? Keep going. Again, I'm providing slides to everyone, so that I just wanted to include this resource. Cool calculator. I say cool, I'm a nerd for this stuff, but a cool calculator created by a few Princeton graduates called FIRE, Financial Independence, Retire Early. It's a calculator that allows you to put in your income, your budget, your savings potential, your balance sheet as of right now, and it projects using assumed assumptions on return, inflation, all these different things to show you what age you'll reach quote unquote financial independence, right? What numbers you need at age 65 in order to spit off $100,000 the rest of your life each year with 100% confidence. It's a very rough estimate, but at least gets you thinking about financial independence and what you need to do to accomplish and get there. Just a resource. The last area I'd like to touch on, and we literally have about 5 minutes left of the session, which is perfect. We'll finish up with about 15 minutes extra. Thinking long-term. And this is when, again, people are coming into just building that foundation. They have no one depending upon them, any of those other areas, right? The people who are just starting to come out. In my opinion, when it comes to the two main types of insurances, right? The protections that people should just be aware of, it's term insurance at the beginning and disability insurance. So again, this is for the young individual, right? Term insurance, the reason I bring it up is because when it comes to this is life insurance, right? God forbid the worst case scenario happens to me and I die. The people who I had named as the beneficiaries on my term insurance receive a large lump sum tax-free death benefit to them directly. Telling you exactly what I do because I eat what I cook. I have right now locked in $1.5 million of term insurance. I do not have that because I'm saying I have that set up, but not because I have 3 kids at home and a wife and everyone who's depending upon me. At least I don't think so. I don't have that set up right now. The reason I'm locking this in isn't for the protection for my beneficiaries, for the people who are dependent upon me. The reason I've locked in term insurance is there's an additional benefit where for the first 10 years of this policy, and it can be set up different ways, but for the first half of this policy, my insurability status is locked in. Life insurance is one of the few vehicles that's actually directly tied to your health. And when you're a young, healthy individual, you can take advantage of that. You can lock in your ultra preferred health, your age of 22, 24, whatever it is. And then for the next 10 years, no matter what happens, knock on wood, God forbid I got cancer tomorrow. It does not matter. This insurance company needs to let me convert my term insurance to a permanent option, no questions asked. It's a seatbelt. Because I've had worst case scenario types of stories with people. I had a 28-year-old client who was diagnosed with MS at age 27. Modern medicine is incredible. He's cured. He's projected to live to age 95, live a long, happy life. But because he has MS on his balance sheet, no insurance company will touch him for at least 30 years. And he just had his first kid. We don't know what's in the future and expected. And so this creates that seatbelt to at least protect yourself over the next 10-year period. Even just from a standpoint as well, even if let's say you stay completely healthy for the rest of your life, you're at the same health rating, the ultra preferred for the next 50 years. Just naturally alone, insurance increases by 6% off age alone. So if you waited 5 years, it's going to be 30% more expensive for you for the same product than if you had actually gotten it 5 years prior. Term insurance, consider it because you lock in your insurability status and take advantage of your young, healthy age. The last one then as well for the young people is disability insurance. When it comes to it, your number one asset right now is your ability to earn an income. I'm assuming most of us don't have a balance sheet that can fully support us for the rest of our life and we can retire and be financially independent. So our ability is to, one, build that up. And that's our ability to earn an income. And so until our balance sheet has reached that level where we're confident in its ability to protect us and actually support us, disability insurance is important because in the God forbid situation you're still living, but you can no longer work, you can no longer do what you need to in order to earn your current income. This replaces that till age 65. And so it protects your ability to build that balance sheet. Any questions on those two things? I go quickly through them, but they're good, especially in my opinion, for the young people to just get exposed to. Overall, and I went through this fast, but when it comes to it, there are 5,000 things I could bring up in terms of financial planning, right? And so when it comes to it, people always ask me, well, what do you do? How can you help? I can't send a tear sheet on exactly everything I can do for my clients, because when it comes down to it, there's so much, it would be overwhelming. And so if anyone's ever curious, having a conversation, sitting down with a financial planner is the best way to do it. Because one, again, we're not lawyers. Jacob, not calling you up. We're not lawyers. We're not going to charge for our time, right? Again, on the fiduciary only standpoint, the only way I can charge is a direct asset under management fee. Meaning once we actually engage in a partnership, the accounts that I manage for you, that's when any fee would be associated to it. So in those preliminary investigative, just us getting to know one another and see what's applicable for you, that's our investment in you and a potential long-term partnership with you. So if you are curious, if you do want to find out exactly what financial tools are going to be smart for you to set up currently, I suggest meeting with a financial professional and just getting their perspective on your personal financial picture. Any questions?
Yeah, Chase, that was great. Thank you so much. I got a quick question for you. So, paying off some sort of higher debt versus using that money to invest. Obviously, you look at the interest rate on the debt, student loan, whatever, whatever it may be, versus the 8 to 10 that you might gain from the market with that money. That's first factor. That's the first thing you look at. What are other things that you suggest to look into? I mean, age of the client obviously is important, how much interest they're going to pay over their life. Other factors, income, I just kind of want to get a general sense of what you exactly look at in that scenario.
100%. So one, it's really a conversation based on interest rates, right? And you were already alluding to that. When it comes to the forms of debt, like for instance, credit card debt, when that initiates and you're looking at a 25 plus interest rate, we're not going to be expecting to beat that in the market, right? The negative 25, 100% takes priority, pay that off immediately. When it comes to things like student debt, mortgages, anything else like that, that's when this planning that you're alluding to comes into place. And so spot on, if we're assuming that on average, we should be able to earn somewhere between 8 to 10% within the market. If we have a negative loan rate of around 4, 5, 6%, right, then we're assuming that our money would be better placed within the investment market, because we know over time that extra delta of 1%, 2%, 3% of the positive will build more for us long term, right? But at the same time, it's not just a, hey, sucks, you gotta have to grind it and just accept it and start to chip away. What we also help our clients with a lot is looking into the assets that they have on the balance sheet and seeing how they can leverage different tools to get themselves an even better interest rate and in a better situation. For instance, let's say you're sitting on theoretically $50,000 of student debt, right? At a 6% rate. If we have a 401k built out, you can take out a loan against a 401k. Right now, they're most likely being issued on average around 3.54%. I'll take that extra 2% right there. If you have a business, you can open up a business line of credit, especially if you have a solo business, an independent business. There are ways that you can tie student loan repayment plans directly through your business, right? And then boom, all of a sudden you can lower your interest rate that way, right? So even though it is a concept and a question of balancing interest rates, there are ways in the way that we help our clients to make those loans as efficient as possible and leverage the tools that you have available within your financial plan. That's more of the concept of, hey, should I consider age and everything else like that? That's more where the actual advanced planning comes from. And I can send you a tool that I have specifically to compare paying off student loans completely or going 50-50 student loans, investing, and kind of comparing those two different models and scenarios. So I'll send you that tool.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate that.
100%. Any other questions? The last thing too, before I end the recording here, in addition to these, I'm building out an app right now where hopefully people can use it as a financial planning tool, right? A place to reference, a place to help them set goals, just understand really what they should be building again in this scope of building a foundation. In the meantime, I've built out these tools, and if anyone's curious or wants to have this material, I can give it to you, right? That's the full-fledged version. I'll first go through the starting version, the smaller version. Easy budgeting tool. Again, we talked about fixed versus variable. Write them all down, start to calculate it. If you have 5,000 of fixed and you earn an income of 10,000, it can help you to actually set a savings goal, see where you're going to be saving on an annual basis, monthly basis. And then you can come over here to the compounding calculator and play with it. Again, I'm a nerd for this stuff, so I have fun typing in here in terms of annual contribution. If you can save that 60,000 over an entire year period, and you're starting off with nothing, the market returning, let's say 8%, and you can play around with it. How much will that give me if I'm currently age 35? What will that give me on average at age 65? Right? Or if I can only save 20,000. Play around with it and see kind of the impact of how investing really can build upon itself. And if anyone's really inclined, I built out a full-fledged version. I made that smaller version because apparently this is a little intimidating to some people. But you can plug in your income, your budget, your risk tolerance, actually get a breakdown on those 4 major areas that we talked about. Where should, if you can save $1,000 a month, how should you be breaking out that $1,000? Keep track of your assets, keep track of your liabilities. If I want to pay off that $50,000 of student loan debt, it's at 5%, and I want to get that done in 10 years. All right, this is how much you have to pay on a monthly basis to get that done. Keep track of your net worth. And then again, the compounding calculators here at the end. And so just 2 tools that I wish I had coming out of graduation, coming out of college, entering into the workforce, even when I just first started my financial foundation planning. And I'm slowly working on building out a sleeker, cleaner model of all of that. But that's the full overview that I'm happy everyone was able to come join for. If anyone has any questions, again, my information is going to be at the back of the slides, phone number, email. Please reach out to me. More than happy to help anyone think through any financial questions that they have. Any questions before we jump off? Hit me.
I got one. So understanding that your compensation is tied to a percentage of investable assets, if you could break this down for someone who has no concept of this and they say, I'm young, I'm only making $50,000 a year, at what point does it financially make sense for me to hire a financial advisor to basically set up my plan, right, and get ahead of it early? Where's that threshold, to understand at what point can I afford this? When does it make sense? When should I get into it?
It's a great question. In my opinion, when it comes down to it, especially determining what the advisor is doing for you, right? Some advisors just manage investments, while some advisors do the holistic financial planning, the estate planning, tax mitigation, retirement planning, insurances, the whole 9 yards. Generally, though, if we're basing everything on assets, I look at really 200,000 to 250 of investable assets. In my opinion, before that, every advisor out there is most likely going to be putting you into an ETF model, because at that level of investable assets, you want to be cost effective. You want to keep costs low, still diversified, but it'll be in ETFs, which is something that if you take the time and kind of break down and find the 4 ETF, 5 ETF model that you want to follow, you'll be pretty like for like. Once you get above that level, there's a lot more that can be done. Right, there's a lot of tax harvesting, which is actually strategically capturing losses within your account, piggybacking them for the long term and using them to offset capital gains in the future. There's mutual funds, there's private investments, there's a lot of different things that once you get above that 250 threshold, become accessible to you. And that's when I think a financial advisor really earns its salt. But at the same time, if you're sitting on 150, 200,000, and all of a sudden you're about to have your second kid, your mom asks for you support, you don't really know what it needed, a financial advisor will just help to really organize everything, right? And so there's different ways to work with one. There's either the direct asset under management fee, or you can even pay this the one-time financial consulting fee where they just help you organize everything. So generally, managing the investable assets, 150 to 200,000. In terms of overall planning, if you're overwhelmed, I think it's always worth it to kind of reach out to somebody and ask. Great question.
Cool. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Awesome. I'm going to stop the recording. So one, thank you to everyone who was watching the video, but I'm going to stop that right now.